She was a billionaire CEO in a wheelchair frozen by pain and pride. He was a single father selling eggs by the roadside in an old military jacket, haunted, silent, broken. What happened when their worlds collided wasn't just a miracle of medicine. It was a healing of hearts long before legs. If you're someone who believes that kindness still changes lives, and that even the most broken souls deserve a second chance, this story was made for you. Subscribe to Soul Moment Story to follow more unforgettable tales of hope, redemption, and quiet miracles that touch the human spirit. Now let's begin. The morning had started like any other for Lauren Calloway, drenched in silence and defined by control. She had built an empire with precision intellect and ice-cold restraint. But as her sleek black wheelchair glided along Fifth Avenue flanked by a row of bodyguards in tailored suits, something unexpected happened. The front left wheel caught on a jagged crack in the sidewalk. For a fraction of a second, time shattered. Lauren's breath hitched. Her balance shifted violently. The wheelchair tipped forward, and the world spun sideways. One of her arms jerked to protect herself, but her paralyzed legs gave her no anchor, no strength. The weight of helplessness surged before impact. She braced to hit the concrete, but she never did. A pair of strong arms caught her mid-fall. Not polished hands from the boardroom, not clinical arms of a therapist. These were scarred, sun-darkened hands, calloused, worn alive. Lucas. He had moved faster than anyone else, faster than her security, faster than her shame. The man had been arranging cartons of brown eggs on an old folding table, a tattered white apron tied over a faded Navy military uniform frayed at the shoulders. There was dirt on his boots and kindness in his eyes. And right now he was kneeling at her feet, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other gently gripping her left knee. Lauren froze. Her lips parted, but no sound emerged. And then something impossible. A spark, not metaphorical. Real. A flicker of warmth, sudden and sharp, radiated from the very point where his palm met her knee. Her eyes widened. She felt it not pain, not pressure, but something she hadn't experienced in 5 long years sensation. A subtle twitch coursed through her thigh. A muscle contraction, reflexive, involuntary, real. Gasps rang out from her security detail as they rushed forward, but Lucas didn't flinch. His eyes remained locked on hers, steady calm with no pity, only presence. A hen perched on his shoulder, of all things, clucked indignantly. One of the egg cartons had fallen eggs cracked open on the pavement. Yolks glistened like golden coins beneath the New York sun. Lauren didn't care. She couldn't breathe. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly, his voice low and grounded like gravel softened by rain. I felt something," she whispered. Lucas tilted his head, slightly confused. "In your leg," she nodded. A tremor passed through her. One of the guards reached them, moving to lift her, but she waved him off sharply. "No, don't touch me." She looked back at Lucas. "You. Just give me a second." Lucas didn't move. His hand was still resting on her knee, almost reverently now. Slowly, reluctantly, he pulled away. The warmth faded. It was as if a curtain had dropped again between her and the world. She blinked, unsure if it had even happened. Maybe it was adrenaline, a fluke, a cruel illusion. But she had felt it. She was sure. Lauren steadied herself in the chair, brushing her blazer flat. Her voice returned crisp, executive, armoring up. "Are you military?" she asked, masking the quake in her tone. Lucas stood slowly. "Was. Navy medic. A long time ago." She glanced at his apron. "And now you sell eggs." He nodded once. "Free range. From our ranch upstate. My daughter and I run it." Lauren's eyes flicked to the ground. Broken eggs, spilled dreams. "You lost a lot of your inventory just now." "It's fine," he said, simply. I'd rather lose a few eggs than see someone fall. That line hit harder than it had any right to. She adjusted in her seat, the coldness returning to her fingers, as she rolled her shoulders back into their usual posture of command. "I'm Lauren Calloway," she said finally. "Thank you for catching me." Lucas offered a respectful nod. "I know who you are." Of course he did. Most people did. Billionaire tech CEO, philanthropist, business legend, and the woman in the wheelchair whose life changed overnight once the cover of Forbes now whispered about in pity. But Lucas didn't stare at her chair. He didn't rush to pretend it didn't exist either. He simply met her eyes level. "I'm Lucas Morrow," he added, "and I think your security detail owes you an apology." She almost smiled. Almost. Instead, she looked down at her leg, willing the sensation to return. It didn't. "I'd like to speak with you again," she said, surprising herself. Lucas raised an eyebrow. "About eggs." "About what just happened," she replied, her voice firm now. He hesitated. "I didn't do anything." "Yes," she said softly, almost to herself. "I think you did." Just then, a small voice called from behind the egg stand. "Daddy, the hen's on your shoulder again." A little girl with messy pigtails and wide, observant eyes peeked out from behind a box. She was holding a chalkboard sign that read, "3 for $5, today only." Lucas turned. "Melody, come say hi." The girl ran forward barefoot on the warm sidewalk and stopped a few feet from Lauren. "You're pretty," she said solemnly, "even if you don't walk." Lauren felt something tighten in her throat. "Thank you," she replied. The girl squinted. "You felt the warm in your legs, didn't you?" Lauren stared. "How did you?" "She always knows," Lucas said almost apologetically. "She's kind of intuitive." Melody nodded, then leaned in conspiratorially. "Daddy can fix people. But only if he doesn't know he's doing it." Melody, Lucas said gently, "That's enough." The girl grinned and skipped back behind the stand. Lauren sat silently for a long beat. Her hand absently brushed her knee. Still nothing. But something had changed. Inside. "I'll find you again, Mr. Morrow," she said. Lucas simply nodded. "We're always here Tuesdays and Fridays, until noon." And with that, he turned to clean up the eggs. Lauren rolled back into the limousine, but everything in her world had tilted slightly. The woman who hadn't felt a thing below the waist in half a decade had just felt something, and it wasn't just in her legs. It was in her heart. And it scared her more than paralysis ever had. The following Friday, Lauren Calloway returned to the street market. Her black SUV pulled discreetly into the rear parking lot behind the old brick church. She wore a cream trench coat over tailored navy slacks, sunglasses large enough to shield most of her face, and a silk scarf knotted with the kind of casual elegance that only the wealthy could achieve. When her assistant had asked why she'd canceled her 10 a.m. call with the Tokyo investors, she had replied crisply, "Organic eggs." Can't trust grocery stores anymore. The real reason sat heavier in her chest. She wanted to see him again. Lucas Morrow, the man with rough hands, steady eyes, and a daughter who spoke like she had a direct line to the universe. But as she wheeled herself down the uneven sidewalk of the small local farmer's market, her fingers tightened slightly around the rims. This wasn't just curiosity. It wasn't just the bizarre electric warmth in her leg. It was something she couldn't name, something she hadn't felt in years. Possibility. The stand came into view tucked between a flower vendor and a booth selling homemade jam. It was modest, 2 wooden crates stacked into a makeshift table, a faded umbrella overhead, and a chalkboard that now read in careful child handwriting, "Today's eggs, approved by Mabel the chicken. Trust her." Lauren blinked. Lucas was behind the stand restocking cartons with quiet focus. He wore the same military jacket sleeves rolled up to his elbows, apron faintly stained. When he looked up and saw her, he didn't smile. He didn't frown either, just offered a simple nod. "You're back," he said. "Apparently your eggs have become a priority," she replied. Lucas handed a customer their change, then turned his full attention to her. "You want a dozen?" Lauren tilted her head. "Do I look like someone who cooks her own eggs?" "No," he said flatly. "But maybe you're someone who wants to try." Before she could respond, a familiar little voice chimed in from under the table. "Daddy." She's the shiny Lady Melody popped up like a spring flower. Barefoot again, her dress patterned with tiny strawberries, and her hair in a lopsided braid. She beamed at Lauren. "Hi, Mabel remembers you." Lauren blinked. "Mabel?" The chicken Melody nodded solemnly. "She's picky, you know. Only climbs on shoulders of people with good hearts. She groomed your coat, so that's like her highest honor." Lucas exhaled softly. But Melody wasn't finished. She leaned in toward Lauren's wheelchair and whispered conspiratorially. She also said, "You smiled with your soul. That's rare." Lauren let out a breath that turned into a sound she hadn't heard from herself in months, a soft, surprised laugh. "Well," she said, adjusting her scarf. "I've never been knighted by a chicken before." Melody clapped. "We should make you a crown of feathers." Lucas cleared his throat. "Melody maybe let Miss Calloway buy her eggs in peace." Lauren raised an eyebrow. "Miss Calloway? Is it? I thought we skipped pleasantries last time." Lucas didn't answer. Instead, he placed a carton of eggs on the table and slid it toward her. "On the house." She narrowed her eyes. "I don't do charity." "Neither do I," he said. "Call it a thank you. For not suing me when I broke your fall." She hesitated, then reached into her bag and placed 2 crisp $20 bills beside the carton. "Then consider it a donation. For Melody's royal court." Lucas accepted the money without argument. Lauren stayed for a moment longer, as if waiting for something. A sign, a tremor in her legs, a spark. But today there was nothing. Just silence. She hated how disappointed that made her. Melody, oblivious, had begun carefully arranging tiny flowers into a bottle cap. "Are you coming back next week too?" "I might," Lauren said softly. Melody grinned. "You should. The eggs taste like sunshine, and Daddy makes the best grilled cheese with them. You'd like our house." Lauren smiled politely, though the idea of visiting someone's house, especially a stranger's, was absurd. She didn't drop by. She hosted boardrooms. But still. "What kind of house do you live in?" she asked, surprising herself. "A cabin," Melody said proudly. "At the edge of the woods. It's old, but it smells like pine and cinnamon. Daddy built the porch himself." Lucas shot his daughter a look, not unkind, but guarded. Lauren noticed. Something wrong with her inviting strange billionaires over Lucas's expression was unreadable. "We've had visitors before, some looking to buy us out, some just curious." "Do I look like a threat?" she asked lightly. "No," he said. "But you look like someone who gets what she wants." Lauren didn't argue. Instead, she let her eyes drift past the booth toward the tree-lined road in the distance. Somewhere beyond that, through winding trails and backcountry roads, was a little cabin filled with pine and cinnamon, and maybe something else. She didn't know yet that the wooden floorboards of that cabin creaked over secrets that had healed more than wounds, that the attic held letters written by a woman long gone, that in the backyard beneath the shade of a whispering oak stood a handmade swing that had once held a mother's hope. No, Lauren didn't know any of that. She only knew that something inside her ached to understand how a child could be so light and a man so silent, and yet their presence made her feel seen in a way her boardroom never had. "Next Friday," she said, lifting the carton into her lap. Same time Lucas nodded once. "Tell Mabel to reserve a feather for me," Lauren added, turning her chair with practiced ease. Melody shouted after her. She already did. As Lauren rolled away down the street, the sounds of the city returned. Honking horns, distant sirens, hurried footsteps. But she heard none of it. All she could hear was a little girl's laughter. And all she could feel was the lingering weight of something unfamiliar and frighteningly warm belonging. It wasn't the eggs that brought Lauren back to town a third time. She told herself it was. That the taste was different, richer somehow, like they'd been laid under sunlight older than the city itself. But truth wore thin on the drive back to Manhattan, and by the time she returned to that sleepy market again, she knew she wanted answers. And maybe something else. That something led her, after a brief detour for coffee, to the modest diner at the edge of the square, Maggie's place. The neon sign buzzed gently in the late morning sun, and the scent of frying bacon floated through the air like an open invitation. The bell above the door jingled as Lauren wheeled herself inside. Heads turned. A few whispers followed. Not many billionaires rolled into Maggie's wearing designer wool and perfume that cost more than a week's worth of rent. But Maggie herself, a broad-shouldered woman with crow's feet, carved from decades of smiling, didn't flinch. She strode out from behind the counter, wiping her hands on a striped apron, and nodded toward the empty booth by the window. "You're not here for bacon and black coffee," she said plainly. Lauren took off her sunglasses. "No. You're here about Lucas." The billionaire didn't deny it. "You know him well." Maggie lowered herself into the opposite seat with the creak of old vinyl. "As well as anyone can know a man who carries silence like it's body armor." Lauren's lips curved slightly. "That sounds poetic. Pain, usually." "Is," Maggie said. She paused. "You're not just another reporter, are you?" "Do I look like someone who writes clickbait?" Maggie squinted at her. "You look like someone who hasn't heard no in a very long time." That one landed. Lauren leaned forward, her voice quiet but firm. "I'm not here to use him. I felt something when he touched my leg that day. Not just physically. Something deeper. And I want to understand it." Maggie studied her. Then she sighed, stood and walked over to the coffee pot. She poured 2 cups black and returned, setting one gently in front of Lauren. "He won't tell you himself, but maybe he should have." She took a long sip, then looked out the window, voice softening. "Lucas Morrow used to be a Navy corpsman, served in Afghanistan. He wasn't a fighter, he was the one who ran into fire to pull the wounded out. The kind of soldier whose hands didn't shake even with bullets singing overhead." Lauren listened, unmoving. His wife Clara was a war correspondent. Brave, too brave, maybe. They met overseas, argued over medical protocols the first week, married the next year. Maggie smiled faintly. They had Melody while on leave. She's the reason Lucas took the final deployment. Wanted one last run to build a future. She paused. But it wasn't last. Not like he hoped. Their convoy was hit outside Kandahar. He survived. She didn't. Silence settled over the booth like dust. "He saw it happen?" Lauren asked. Maggie nodded. Clara bled out right in front of him. He did everything right. But he couldn't save her. Lauren exhaled slowly. "He came back with his body intact, and his faith shattered," Maggie said. "Stopped practicing medicine, refused VA benefits, moved out here where no one asked questions. Spends his days raising chickens, selling eggs, and keeping Melody's world as simple and beautiful as he can manage. But he has." Something Lauren said almost to herself. "A gift. What he did to my leg, no doctor has ever." Maggie cut in, gentle but firm. "He won't use it again. Not willingly." Lauren's eyes found the steaming coffee. "What if someone needs it?" Maggie looked at her, then really looked. "Are you talking about yourself, Miss Calloway?" Lauren didn't answer. Maggie leaned back. "Then I'll tell you this: Lucas isn't a project. He's not a problem to fix. He's a man who lost the only person he ever trusted with his whole heart. And since then, he's trusted no one, not even himself. Lauren didn't return to the market that day. Instead, she sent her driver to pick up Melody's eggs. And 3 days later, she did what she never did. She handwrote a note. Lucas found the envelope tucked between 2 cartons, Melody's name scrawled in purple crayon on the outside, but inside it read, "I know what it means to build walls so tall no one can reach you. I know what it is to lose faith. But I don't believe gifts are meant to be buried in grief. I have a proposal. 1 hour. My building. No cameras. No obligations. Just a woman who wants to believe in something again. Lauren." He crumpled the letter once, then uncrumpled it. When he arrived, he wore the same faded jacket, a knit cap pulled low. The guard didn't even question him. Lauren had left strict instructions. In the therapy room, a private wing on the 38th floor of Callaway Tower's sunlight poured through glass so clean it was nearly invisible. The space was minimal, a padded table medical equipment, massage oils, and Lauren sitting in her chair, quiet, waiting. "I shouldn't have come," Lucas said as the door shut behind him. "But you did." He looked at her, then eyes tired but alert. "I don't do this anymore. I'm not asking for miracles." "Yes, you are." Lauren's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "That day when you touched my knee, there was light. There was heat. I felt something I haven't in half a decade." Lucas flinched. "It wasn't me." "You don't believe that." He paced. "I told you. I don't heal anymore." "Why?" He stopped, stared at the far wall like it could give him answers. Finally, his voice cracked open. "Because the last person I tried to save was Clara, and I failed. My hands, my knowledge, my love, none of it was enough. If I couldn't save her, I don't deserve to save anyone else." Lauren blinked. "So your punishment is silence?" He turned to her jaw tight. "My punishment is waking up every day and pretending I'm still capable of fixing anything." Silence bloomed again. Then Lauren spoke, quiet but steady. "You didn't fail her. You loved her. That was the point." Lucas looked away. She added gently, "Wouldn't Clara want you to help someone if you could?" He didn't respond, only walked to the door, paused, and said without turning, "I'm sorry, but I'm not the man you're looking for." Then he left, and for the first time in 5 years, Lauren didn't feel the cold in her legs. She only felt it in her chest. The penthouse was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that only exists above the city, above noise, above ordinary life. Lauren Callaway hated silence. Her aides had left hours ago. They never stayed past 10. She insisted. The appearance of control mattered especially when you had so little of it. Midnight loomed outside her floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan glowing like a sea of stars below. Lauren wheeled herself toward the kitchen, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for the stem of a wine glass. Her fingers missed. The crystal fell. Time slowed as it shattered against the marble floor. Pieces scattered like diamonds, sharp and gleaming. Startled, Lauren jerked back, and the chair tipped. There was no grace in the fall, no cushion to break it, just the hard, cold slap of the floor against her hip elbow and pride. Pain shot up her side like fire-licking bone. Her breath caught in her chest. She lay still, humiliated, furious, broken in ways that weren't visible. She reached for the wheelchair just out of reach. Her intercom buzzed. She ignored it. It buzzed again. And then, against protocol, her front door opened. Lauren, a voice called. Low, uncertain. Masculine. Lucas. She couldn't even summon the energy to yell. Her voice caught in her throat as the footsteps approached across the hardwood. He stopped in the doorway holding a carton of eggs. He froze when he saw her on the floor, Legs twisted her silk robe, pooling like spilled water glass, glittering around her like a crime scene. He started. "Don't," she snapped, eyes flashing. "Don't pity me. I wasn't going to." Lucas knelt beside her. She tried to swat him away, but her arm barely moved. "I don't need help," she whispered, furious at herself. "Then pretend you're helping me," he said quietly. His arms slid beneath her, careful, practiced, like someone who had lifted too many broken bodies from too many war zones. Her breath caught again, but not from pain this time. He carried her to the couch and set her down, gently avoiding her eyes. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she winced. Where he asked. "My knee," she said through gritted teeth. "Left one." Lucas hesitated. A beat too long. Then he moved his hand, hovering above the joint like it was sacred ground. "I won't ask you to fix anything," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not here to fix anything," he replied. He placed his palm gently on her knee. And then warmth. A low pulse like the earth humming beneath pavement. A flicker. A spark. Not pain. Never pain, but pressure. Like a breath, long held, finally being exhaled. Lauren gasped. Not from the heat. From the movement. Her leg just slightly twitched. A tremor, as if remembering it once belonged to a dancer, to a runner, to a woman who used to feel everything. Her eyes flooded. 5 years. 5 long, cruel years of nothingness, of dead weight, of being told by the world that she would never feel that again. And now, she stared at him as if trying to memorize the shape of his soul. "I don't know what you just did," she said, voice breaking. "But it's what I've been waiting for, every single day since the accident." Lucas pulled his hand back like he'd touched fire. "I shouldn't have come in," he muttered. "You saved me." "I didn't mean to," she laughed, breathless. "That's the problem with you. You keep saving people by accident." Lucas stood, his jaw clenched. "This isn't what you think it is." "No," she challenged. "Then what is it?" He didn't answer, just backed toward the door like a man afraid of the light he carried. I felt something she said. "You did too." That was adrenaline. She raised an eyebrow. Adrenaline doesn't make paralyzed limbs twitch. He reached the door. "Don't ask me for this again." "I didn't ask," she said. "I fell." He hesitated. Then, exactly. And he was gone. Lauren sat there, long after her pulse echoing in her knees, her fingers brushing the spot where his hand had been. The broken glass remained on the floor. But something else, something far more fragile, was beginning to piece itself back together. Her pride. Perhaps. But deeper than that, hope, and that was infinitely more dangerous. The next morning, her staff found the mess. They offered apologies called private doctors offered to file insurance reports. Lauren waved them off. She didn't explain the twitch, or the warmth, or the man with war behind his eyes, who had stepped through her door like he was being pulled by fate. She only asked for fresh eggs, and for the number to Maggie's diner. Meanwhile, Lucas drove back to the cabin in silence, Melody asleep in the back seat. The city lights faded behind him, swallowed by trees and dust. He glanced at his hand, the one that had made her leg move, the one that had once failed to save Clara. It didn't shake. Not anymore. But his chest did. Because for the first time in years, he hadn't felt like a ghost holding on to someone else's memory. He'd felt real. And that terrified him more than war ever had. The storm had passed, but the city remained wet with its memory. Rain slid down the windows of the downtown cafe like tears unwilling to fall. The world outside blurred behind gray glass, perfect camouflage for secrets not meant to be seen. Lauren Calloway sat across from Lucas, her wheelchair tucked quietly beneath the cafe's rustic wooden table. The cafe was empty, except for the two of them and the hiss of a distant espresso machine. Melody had been left with Maggie at Lauren's request. This conversation was meant for no one else. Lucas stirred his coffee, though he hadn't taken a single sip. His hands, rough, calloused, scarred by war and work, seemed too big for the delicate cup. He said nothing, just waited. He had learned long ago that silence, when held long enough, revealed more than questions ever could. Lauren's gaze wasn't on him. It was on her lap, on legs that hadn't carried her in 5 years, on the hands folded tightly together like she was holding her breath. Then she spoke. My husband was a cardiac surgeon. The best. Or so I thought. Lucas looked up. During a conference trip in Aspen, I slipped in the hotel bathroom. Minor fracture, at least it should have been. But the surgeon on call was delayed by snow, and my husband insisted on operating. Said he had done similar procedures before. Said he knew what he was doing. She paused, swallowing the bitterness. Lucas didn't interrupt. He severed something he shouldn't have. Not just physically. Something inside me broke that night, in ways that couldn't be scanned or repaired. She finally looked at him. I woke up without my legs, and with the knowledge that the man who vowed to protect me had failed me in every way. Lucas set the spoon down, his knuckles white. I didn't sue. I didn't go public. He begged me. Said it would ruin his career, destroy the hospital's reputation tank, my company's stock. He reminded me I was a brand. So you protected him, Lucas said quietly. No, she said. I protected the image I had spent my entire life building. I protected the idea that I was still in control, even as I lost everything. Silence. Heavy. Thick with regret and recognition. I thought she whispered that if I buried the truth deep enough, I could build over it, like a new skyscraper on a demolished foundation. But secrets crack the walls eventually. Lucas's eyes darkened, not with judgment, but with something gentler. Familiarity. You weren't just paralyzed in your legs, he said. You were paralyzed in your soul. Lauren blinked. The words hit harder than she expected. He leaned back. When I lost Clara, my wife, it was in Kandahar. I was escorting a convoy of wounded locals to a trauma tent. We got hit. Roadside IED. Lauren inhaled sharply. She was there on a volunteer mission, not even supposed to be near that route. I told her to stay back. She didn't. When the explosion hit, she was next to a boy who had just lost his leg. She was shielding him. He didn't cry, but something in his voice cracked. I ran to her. I tried everything. CPR pressure, screaming at God. But I couldn't stop the bleeding. She died in my arms, Lauren, looking up at me like I was the last person who should have failed her. Lauren reached out instinctively. Her fingers brushed his. I was a combat medic, decorated, trusted with lives, and I couldn't save the only one that mattered. His jaw clenched. After that, I couldn't touch another wound. I quit. Vanished. I told myself I didn't deserve to heal anyone else, because if I could fail Clara, I could fail anyone. Lauren's voice was soft. So you ran from the battlefield? No, he said. I stayed on it. Just changed uniforms. You know how many ways a man can punish himself in silence. Turns out selling eggs in the cold is just one. She gave a sad smile. And you weren't just a medic. You were a healer. I was, he said, until I wasn't. A beat passed. Lauren looked at her knee, now swaddled under cashmere. Whatever happened that night in my penthouse, I don't think it was just science. Lucas shook his head. It wasn't magic either. But it was something she insisted. Something in your hands. Something I haven't felt since before the accident. He looked at her. I didn't come here to reopen wounds. No, she said. But maybe they need to bleed a little before they close for good. Outside, the rain slowed to a whisper. The clouds began to part, revealing slivers of pale morning light. Lauren glanced down at her legs. "I've never told anyone that story," she said. Lucas nodded. "Then I guess we're even." She smiled this time with no bitterness. "No, we're not. You gave me something. A spark. A chance." His brow furrowed. "You gave me something too, Lauren. A reminder that broken things aren't useless." She breathed slowly, then reached into her bag and slid a folded envelope across the table. "What's this?" he asked. "A proposal." "I told you, it's not therapy," she said. "It's trust. I want to hire you not as a medic, not as a healer, as someone who knows what it means to lose everything and still show up anyway. Help me build something from what's left." Lucas hesitated. His hand hovered over the envelope, his scars, his silence, his guilt all visible in that moment. Then slowly he took it. The paper was warm from her touch. "I'll think about it," he said. "Take your time," she replied. But something in her eyes already knew he wouldn't say no. That night, as Lucas tucked Melody into bed back at the cabin, she whispered, "Daddy." "Yeah, Buck. You look different." He smiled, brushing hair from her forehead. "How so? Like you're not holding your breath anymore." Lucas sat on the edge of her bed long after she fell asleep, staring at his hands. Veteran's hands, shaking hands, healing hands, and maybe hands that still had work to do. The box was velvet red, dustless despite the years. Lauren's fingers trembled as she opened it, as if she were lifting the lid on a life she'd buried. Inside lay a pair of high heels, cherry red, sharp, and impossibly elegant. The kind of shoes made not for walking, but for arrival, for owning a room, for becoming a memory in someone else's eyes. She hadn't worn them. Not once. They had been purchased the week before the surgery. Back then, she'd imagined walking into the boardroom of Callaway Tech with these very shoes, making her first public speech as CEO. Her vision was clear, polished oak floors, eyes turning applause. The heels would make their sound, click, 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 announcing her not just as a leader, but as a woman unbroken. But the surgery never gave her that chance. Now, 5 years later, she held them in her lap, like relics from a cathedral no longer standing. She stared for a long time before finally placing them gently into a paper bag and folding the top. Lucas was fixing a plank on his makeshift egg stand when he saw the black car approach again. This time, no guards, no formal entrance, just Lauren in her chair, a simple wool coat over her shoulders, a paper bag resting in her lap. She didn't speak right away. Her eyes drifted to the chicken coop behind him, where Melody was chasing a particularly defiant hen with wild laughter. Lauren finally said, "This is for you." Lucas wiped his hands, took the bag reluctantly. He opened it, puzzled, and froze. He stared at the shoes like they were a mistake. "They're not for me," he said, slowly confused. "They are," she insisted gently. "They're for hope. I've been keeping them all these years. If one day I walk again, I'll wear these into your market, not with security or headlines, just as a woman, not a CEO, not a story." Lucas looked pained, like something in him was caught between breathing and breaking. "I'm not your miracle," he murmured, handing the bag back. But Lauren didn't reach for it. Her eyes didn't plead. She simply looked at him the way someone might look at a sunrise, quiet, reverent, and patient. "I don't want a miracle. Just someone who believes I might deserve one." Lucas looked away, his jaw clenched. "Belief is dangerous," he said almost bitterly. "It makes you think you can save people." She gave a sad smile. "That's why I gave the shoes to you." He placed the bag on the stand between them like a boundary line neither dared cross. Later that evening, after Melody had fallen asleep in the corner with her sketchbook still in her hands, Lucas stared at the bag for a long time. He didn't move it, didn't touch it. But Melody did. She tiptoed, pulled the shoes out delicately like sacred things, and cradled them in her tiny arms. Her eyes widened, tracing the slope of the heel, the shimmer of the leather. She knew what these were. She had seen them in fashion magazines her mom used to read. With careful steps, she brought them to the small altar in the corner of their wooden cabin, a low shelf above her mom's old violin case. There, beside a faded photo of her mother, in uniform, she placed the shoes. Then she knelt. "Mom," she whispered the way she had every night since she could remember. "I know you believed in Dad when he couldn't believe in himself. I see it sometimes. How he looks when no one's watching. Like he's afraid he'll break things by trying to fix them." Her fingers traced the toe of one shoe. "Help him heal her," she said softly. "Not just her legs, her heart too. So maybe he'll remember he can still help people. That he's still good. That he's still yours." There was no reply, only the faint creak of wind through wooden slats and the rhythmic breathing of a sleeping dog at the foot of her bed. But Melody felt something in the room shift. Not a sound. Not a light. Just warmth. She looked up at her mother's photo and smiled. Then she curled up beside the altar, the red shoes glowing faintly in the moonlight. The next morning, Lucas found them there. He paused one hand on the doorframe. His breath caught when he saw where Melody had placed the heels right beneath his wife's picture, right beside her folded flag. He sat down slowly. His fingers brushed the leather. Smooth. New. Unworn. He didn't move them. Couldn't. Instead, he whispered, "She believes I can fix someone again." His voice cracked. "I don't know if I can." But he didn't move the shoes. He left them there like a prayer waiting to be answered. The headlines came without warning, sharp, bold, and merciless. Billionaire CEO's secret surgery scandal. Was her husband involved? Callaway Industries in crisis. Lauren Callaway steps down amid controversy. It was like watching someone drown in slow motion. The same woman who once sat on magazine covers, whose name opened doors and silenced boardrooms, now filled the gossip columns and late-night jokes. The story had leaked from a former hospital employee, anonymous, of course. They'd hinted just enough, a prominent surgeon, a botched spinal surgery, a cover-up under corporate pressure. Names weren't needed. The pieces fit. Lauren didn't issue a press release. She didn't run damage control. She simply left. Inside the sleek penthouse she no longer owned, silence clung to the air like smoke. She sat by the window, her wheelchair unmoving eyes fixed on the city she once ruled. A single statement had been released through her lawyer. Out of respect for ongoing legal considerations and personal healing. Ms. Callaway declines to comment at this time. Lucas read the article twice, then again. His hands trembled, not from doubt, not from scandal, but from something colder rage. Not at the media, not even at the public who fed on her downfall, but at her, at Lauren, because she hadn't fought back. He stood in the kitchen of Maggie's diner apron, still on the newspaper, trembling in his fist. She let them do this to her, he muttered. Maggie looked up from wiping down the counter. She's protecting someone, she said quietly. Probably the same person who hurt her. Lucas didn't reply. He just stared at the black and white image of Lauren alone in her wheelchair, flanked by headlines instead of bodyguards. That evening, Melody found her father sitting on the porch outside their cabin, elbows resting on his knees, the air thick with unspoken frustration. The sun had begun to slip behind the hills, painting the sky in hushed orange and lavender tones. She walked over barefoot, careful not to startle the chickens nestled in their coop. Clutched in her hand was a crumpled napkin from the diner, her latest drawing of Lauren and her red heels. She didn't speak at first, only sat beside him on the top step. Then softly she asked Daddy, "Would you help someone you didn't know?" If they fell, Lucas blinked. "What do you mean?" Melody shrugged, swinging her legs. "Like if someone tripped in the street. You'd help them, right?" He sighed. "I used to. I was trained to. In the Navy. There was a time I thought it was my job to stop people from bleeding from dying. Then your mom." He stopped. The words were old glass, still sharp. Melody waited. She always did. She never rushed the things that hurt. Lucas finally said, "I guess. I started thinking I wasn't meant to help anymore. That maybe I'd used up whatever good was in these hands." Melody looked up, her tone feather light. "But Lauren's not bleeding." "No," he whispered, "but she's falling." She turned the drawing over and handed it to him. On the back, in her uneven scrawl, was one sentence. "If someone falls and no one helps, maybe they stop trying to get up." Lucas stared at it. The childlike wisdom cut cleaner than any blade. He thought of Lauren, how she'd looked when he first met her, regal yet hollow. How she'd tried to buy eggs with a card she couldn't lift. How her laugh had returned in small, flickering doses when Melody spoke. How her voice trembled not with weakness, but with something braver, honesty, when she told him about her past. And now, how she vanished into silence again. Hiding. Protecting others at the cost of herself. "I don't think she wants to be saved," he murmured. Melody tilted her head. "That's okay. You don't save people because they ask. You save them because it's the right thing to do." Lucas swallowed. Sometimes the only person who could remind a man who he was his own child. The next morning, Lauren found a carton of eggs on her doorstep. No note, no receipt, just eggs. Clean, warm, and neatly stacked. She blinked at them. The sight made her throat tighten in a way she didn't expect. Hours later, the doorbell rang. When she opened it, Lucas stood there, not with eggs, not with an apology, but with presence, with decision. "I read the papers," he said. His voice was low, steady, like boots crunching gravel. She looked away. "You shouldn't have come." "I didn't come for gossip. I came because you didn't." Her brows furrowed. "You didn't defend yourself," he said. "You let them bury you." She held his gaze. "It's not worth dragging my company into more scandal. It's your name, your truth. Don't let someone else write your story." She blinked back, something unshed. "Lucas, I've lived with shame so long I stopped thinking I deserved anything else." He stepped forward slowly. His eyes weren't soft. They were fire. "But you do. You deserve to stand." He reached into his pocket, pulled out Melody's folded drawing. Lauren opened it, stared at the words. Her hand trembled. She whispered, "Did she write this?" He nodded. She still believes in heroes, even if they don't believe in themselves. Lauren smiled, just faintly. Then for the first time since the news broke, she straightened her shoulders. Not to stand, but to choose, to stop falling, and maybe start rising. The room buzzed with tension. The shareholders' emergency meeting had drawn cameras from every major news outlet. Flash bulbs popped like fireworks, casting momentary halos over anxious executives and stony-faced board members. At the center of it all was Lauren Calloway, once the face of innovation and poise, now sitting in silence, her wheelchair anchored before the towering podium. The screen behind her played the same headline over and over: CEO paralyzed in botched surgery, doctor husband allegedly involved. Though her attorneys had advised silence, Lauren had insisted on attending in person. She had nothing left to protect. Not her position, not her pride, not even her name. But someone else did. A hush fell across the hall as the side doors creaked open. Boots echoed on polished marble. A man stepped through, not in a suit or with a prepared statement, but in a faded U.S. Navy uniform. The cloth was worn. The medals were gone. But the bearing, straight-backed eyes forward was unmistakable. Gasps rippled. Whispers rose. Lauren's breath caught as she recognized him. Lucas. He walked with calm precision past confused security up the aisle, flanked by shocked investors, and stepped directly onto the stage. Someone moved to stop him, but Lauren's voice, soft but firm, carried through the microphone. Let him speak. Lucas turned to face the room. The lights bore down hot and unforgiving. He took a moment scanning the sea of skeptical, judging faces. Then he spoke, voice low and even. My name is Lucas Everett. I served 3 tours as a Navy combat medic. I lost good men. I saved some. I came back home with hands that could stop bleeding, but a heart that couldn't. A murmur moved through the audience. He gestured toward Lauren. This woman, right here. She's the first reason I've had in years to believe I wasn't put on this earth just to witness pain. Lauren's eyes widened. She'd never heard him speak like this. Not in the market. Not at the cabin. Not even when she told him her truth. She came to my stall buying eggs. That's all. No camera. No entourage. Just a woman who could have ordered breakfast from a $1,000 room service tray, but chose a man standing in mud with a carton of cracked shells. Soft laughter. Nervous. Curious. She didn't ask me for anything, but she gave me back something I didn't know I'd lost. He paused. Swallowed. The will to heal. A flicker of emotion surged through the crowd. Some leaned forward. Others looked toward Lauren, now visibly trembling. You want to strip her title? Take her company. Fine. Do it. But don't tell the world she's a fraud. Because if you do, then this country's forgotten what leadership really is. He stepped closer to the microphone. His voice grew firmer. Leadership isn't about avoiding mistakes. It's about owning them. It's about protecting others even when it costs you everything. And it's about love the kind that doesn't need press releases or quarterly profits to prove its worth. The board chair shifted uncomfortably. Reporters clutched their pens tighter. Lucas looked at Lauren. She told you she was paralyzed in a surgery gone wrong, but she never told you what she did after. He turned back to the room. She stayed. She built. She led. With pain, with guilt, and with integrity. His final words rang out clear. If you don't want her, fine. But America needs more people like Lauren Calloway. And his voice cracked, then steadied. I'd follow her anywhere. There was no applause. Not yet. Just silence. And then like a slow tide, someone rose. Maggie, from the back. Then a second voice, an older man in a pressed suit. Then another. And another. It wasn't loud. It wasn't theatrical. But it was real. Lauren stared at him, tears now trailing silently down her cheeks. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a broken executive clinging to reputation. She felt seen. Truly seen. Lucas gave a final nod and stepped down, not waiting for interviews or reactions. As he walked past her, he gently placed his hand on her shoulder. You taught me how to heal again, he whispered. It's only fair I return the favor. Lauren couldn't speak. She simply reached up, and for the first time in 5 years, she stood. Just an inch, just a trembling rise from her chair. But it was enough to make the room gasp. It was enough to change everything. The room was so still, it felt like time itself had hit pause. Hundreds of eyes locked on the figure seated at the center of the stage. The media had come for a spectacle, stockholders had come for blood, but none of them had expected silence. And in that silence, Lauren Calloway's breathing echoed like thunder in her own ears. The podium still vibrated faintly from Lucas's speech. His voice calm, unwavering, so unlike the broken man she'd met in an alley, still hung in the air like incense. Even now he stood just to the left of the stage, in that worn military uniform, arms crossed unreadable. Lauren's fingers trembled on the armrests of her wheelchair. She could feel it again. That faint warmth, not pain, not pressure, but something alive, something stirring. It had begun days ago in whispers under her skin. Since that night, Lucas touched her knee to ease the pain. Since Melody's tiny hands slipped the red heels under her pillow like a sacred offering. Since she found in a man broken by war and guilt the audacity to believe in healing. Now, in front of a city that had once lifted her up and now called for her fall, that belief demanded a choice. She looked out at the rows of board members stiff and expressionless, the executives who'd been whispering about her resignation, the anchors from national news, their cameras locked and zoomed in. She even saw Dr. Stephen Alden, her ex-husband, in the second row, arms folded. Watching. Waiting. Lauren inhaled slowly, and then she spoke. "I built this company," she said, voice low but gaining strength, not from scandal, but from grit, from the belief that vision mattered more than perfection. And I let my silence become complicity. A few murmurs scattered through the crowd. I didn't lose the use of my legs in a car crash, she continued, eyes narrowing as she turned toward the cameras. I lost it on an operating table because the man I trusted most, my husband, chose to gamble my life for his record. A gasp surged through the audience like a wave. I stayed silent to protect the company. I thought if I bore the shame alone, the rest would survive. But I was wrong. Truth isn't a liability. It's the only foundation strong enough to build something that lasts. Her voice cracked, and she paused, letting the weight of her words settle. Across the stage, Lucas didn't move. He simply nodded ever so slightly like a soldier, acknowledging a comrade who had finally stood their ground. Then Lauren did something no one expected. She placed her hands on her thighs and let go. Her arms fell to her sides as she pushed her weight forward, her body trembling as her feet, useless for 5 years, pressed down into the floor. Her knees wobbled. A camera clicked, then another, and another. Her torso swayed, her lips parted not in pain, but in raw, gasping disbelief. She rose. First an inch, then more. The steel frame of the wheelchair creaked behind her as she leaned fully upright, arms no longer holding her up, only balance trembling and thin as a breath. Gasps filled the air. No one clapped. No one moved. The moment was too delicate, too sacred for applause. Lucas's jaw tensed, his hands clenched unconsciously. He did not step forward, did not rush to hold her up. This wasn't his moment. It was hers. A small thud broke the trance. From the side of the stage, tiny feet came running, sneakers against carpet, and then Melody, breathless and wide-eyed, burst onto the stage. "Miss Lauren," she shouted, tears spilling from her cheeks. Lauren's arms opened instinctively, and the girl flung herself into her. The embrace nearly toppled her, but Lucas was there in a blur, one steady hand reaching out to brace Lauren's back without overtaking the moment. Just enough to hold, to honor, to protect. Lauren closed her eyes, her chin resting on Melody's crown. "I'm standing," she whispered into the child's hair. "I know." Melody sniffled. "I knew you could." Lauren looked up, eyes glassy, smile quivering, and finally turned to Lucas. "I didn't do this alone." He shook his head gently. "You did the hardest part. You believed again." She reached for his hand. "You too." In the crowd, someone finally stood. Then another. And another. Within seconds, the entire room was on its feet, not clapping, yet not cheering, but standing as if by rising, they too could absorb a sliver of this moment. As if the act of standing, often so mundane, had been transformed into something reverent. Stephen, her ex-husband, didn't move, but Lauren didn't look his way again. Lucas stepped forward, slipping his arm beneath hers, not to lift her, but to walk beside her. together they moved toward the edge of the stage, each slow step a rebellion against every voice that said healing was impossible. Flashbulbs lit the room. The headlines would write themselves. But Lauren no longer cared. This moment of trembling strength and silent defiance was not for newspapers, not for shareholders. It was for a little girl who believed red heels could be worn again. It was for a veteran who learned his hands could still heal. And it was for every soul watching who needed to believe that standing was still possible, even after you've fallen. 6 months later, the Montana sky, wide and washed in soft amber light, stretched endlessly over the quiet little farmer's market. It was a Saturday, the kind that smelled of fresh bread, warm coffee, and memories. The crowd was light, familiar faces, moving at a slow, contented pace. Lucas stood behind his makeshift wooden stand, carefully arranging eggs into cartons. The sun picked out the edges of his faded navy blue military shirt, still worn like armor, though now without the weight. His apron was stained, and his boots were dusty, but his hands moved with an ease that hadn't been there before. He was humming. Just beside him, Melody crouched on a stool, meticulously counting chickens, with a pencil in her mouth and a notepad in her hand, like she was managing a fortune. She looked up every few seconds, scanning the crowd, as if searching for a miracle she'd been promised. And then she saw it. "Daddy," she whispered, nudging his arm, eyes wide. Lucas looked up. At first it didn't register. People walked past. Then he saw her. Lauren Calloway. She was walking slowly, carefully, with the aid of 2 sleek aluminum crutches that caught the sunlight like silver wings. Her stride wasn't steady, not yet. But it was hers. She moved through the market like she belonged, like she had always belonged. Her outfit was simple, a soft cream blouse, a flowing skirt that caught the breeze, and sunglasses perched atop her head, pushing back hair that had grown longer. A quiet smile played at her lips, and there was no entourage, no press, no wheelchair, just her. Lucas froze, his hand stilled on a carton of eggs, his breath caught halfway in his chest. She saw him. And in that moment, the noise of the world, the market, the birds, the wind fell away. Lauren's eyes glistened, and she raised a hand slightly off one crutch in greeting. Lucas didn't wave back. Instead, slowly he stepped out from behind the table. Melody stayed still, watching wide-eyed. From beneath the egg stand, Lucas reached into an old wooden crate. He pulled out a shoebox. Not just any shoebox, that shoebox. Dust had settled on it, but the red ribbon tying it shut was the same. He didn't say a word. He walked toward her, stopping just in front of her crutches. Lauren tilted her head. "You didn't throw them away. I almost did," he replied, voice low. "Twice." Her breath hitched. Lucas knelt. It wasn't showy. It wasn't dramatic. It was reverent. He untied the ribbon with quiet hands, opened the box, and revealed the red heels, polished, beautiful, untouched. Lauren laughed softly, the sound trembling in her throat. "I can't wear those yet." He looked up at her, his expression unreadable at first. Then it broke into a look of something deeper than pride, something closer to awe. "You're walking. That's more than enough." She lowered herself to the nearby bench crutches, leaning against the armrest. Lucas knelt before her, and without asking, lifted her left foot with care. His fingers were warm. He slid on the heel. She didn't resist. Then the other. He looked at her feet, then up to her face. "You're not just walking," he said. "You're rising. And you deserve to rise like a queen." The heels clicked gently on the pavement as she slowly stood, more steady than she expected. A few nearby shoppers turned, catching the surrealness of the moment, the woman who used to be in the news for her. Fall from grace, now standing taller than she ever had, in red heels, in a farmer's market beside a man in a tattered uniform, and his barefoot little girl. Melody ran over and wrapped herself around Lauren's leg. "I knew you'd wear them one day." She grinned. "You look like a superhero." Lauren placed a hand on the girl's soft hair, emotions welling too quickly to contain. She turned to Lucas. "I miss this place," she said. "The smell of rain in the dust, the way the sun doesn't apologize for being bright." He smiled. "And the overpriced eggs," she laughed again, wiping a tear. "Especially the eggs." There was a silence, warm and expansive. "I don't have my company anymore," she said after a pause. "I know. I don't know what's next." Lucas looked away for a moment. "Neither do I." She stepped forward. "Then maybe we can figure it out together." His eyes met hers. Behind them, Melody tugged on his apron. "Can we go get lemonade now?" "This is way too many feelings for one morning," Lauren chuckled. Lucas gave a small nod. "Deal." But first he turned to Lauren again. "Can I walk with you?" She held out her arm, no longer needing support, but offering it anyway. He took it, and they walked through the market, red heels tapping softly beside weathered boots, the past behind them, the present unfolding, and the future uncertain, but no longer frightening, just a few steps ahead. The morning sun stretched gently across the quiet Montana market, bathing the wooden stalls in a golden hush. There was no crowd today, just the rustling breeze, the soft cluck of hens, and the faint scent of fresh bread and apples in the air. Lauren sat beside Lucas's egg stand, wrapped in a hand-knit shawl Melody had draped over her shoulders. Her crutches rested against the bench. She no longer needed them to move, but today she kept them like faded battle flags from a war long fought and quietly won. Melody had fallen asleep, curled in Lauren's lap, her tiny hand still holding a crayon drawing of the three of them under a bright yellow sun. Lucas poured hot tea into a pair of chipped ceramic mugs, the steam rising in delicate spirals, dancing like smoke from old stories. For a long time they didn't speak. They didn't need to. Then, with a quiet glance toward Lauren, Lucas said softly, "You look like you've been here your whole life." She smiled, brushing a lock of Melody's hair away from the girl's forehead. "That's strange," she whispered. "I used to think I belonged everywhere, but never quite fit in." Boardrooms, cities' headlines, all of it felt like borrowed skin. Lucas took a seat beside her, his hand warm on her back. Not pushing, not steadying, just there. Lauren turned to him, her eyes reflecting the slow amber light. "Do you remember the first time we met? I remember chickens on my shoulder, and eggs rolling into traffic," he chuckled. "Not exactly heroic." "You touched my knee," she said quietly. "And I felt something I hadn't in 5 years. Not just the nerves waking up. It was like someone reminded my soul it still had a pulse." Lucas looked away, overwhelmed. She continued, her voice now like the final note of a cello, deep, warm, lingering. "You didn't heal my legs, Lucas. You healed the part of me that stopped believing I mattered. You touched the shame I buried under diamonds and press conferences. You helped me walk again, from the inside out." Lucas's jaw clenched, not out of pain, but reverence. "I used to think I broke the day my wife died," he said. "And then I broke again when I couldn't save you the first time I saw you in that chair. But now I know. Sometimes the only way to truly heal is to sit with someone else's brokenness and not run." She looked down at Melody asleep in her lap. "You taught her," that Lauren said. "You raised her with love and quiet strength. You kept going when the world said stop. That's a miracle, too." Lucas chuckled softly. "Funny. I used to believe miracles were loud, thunder-like voices from the sky. Turns out they sound more like this chickens clucking a girl laughing tea boiling." Lauren nodded. Her eyes welled, but this time, it wasn't sadness, just awe. She leaned into him and he didn't flinch. He welcomed her weight like he'd waited years to carry it. Then, over the gentle hum of wind and feathers, her voice faded in. He didn't heal my legs. He healed the self-loathing that lived behind my spine. And I didn't save him either. I only reminded him that kindness is never wasted. That even broken people can be someone's miracle. Sometimes all we need is someone who still believes we're worth healing. Lucas looked at her tears, rimmed but unshed. He reached for the kettle and refilled her cup. Funny thing he said. I used to think miracles weren't for people like me, people who'd been shattered. He glanced at Melody. Now I know. Miracles happen when two broken people believe in each other enough to try again. Lauren smiled. That's not funny at all. She took a sip. The tea was strong, earthy, honest. Just like them. Fade to black. Where in the world are you watching from? We'd truly love to know where this story found you today. If this journey touched your heart, please consider subscribing to Soul Moment Story, a quiet place on the internet where stories of kindness, healing, and love still matter. And from all of us behind the screen, thank you for spending your time with us. Your presence here means more than you know. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and take good care.